Look at almost any classic depiction of the Alamo, and you will see some version of this, a glorious, sunlit final stand. Davy Crockett swinging his rifle, a line drawn in the sand, a defense against impossible odds. But the mission on March 6, 1836, looked very different. That iconic curved roofline we all recognize today was actually added by the U.S. Army in 1850, 14 years after the battle was over. Defending this crumbling limestone mission made no tactical sense. The commander of the Texian army, Sam Houston, had already ordered the fort abandoned and its cannons destroyed weeks before the siege even began. The men inside ignored that order, staying to face a 90-minute rush of disorganized, close-quarters violence that the historical record is only now beginning to untangle. To understand how the Republic of Texas was born, we have to strip away a century of sanitized folklore. We have to look directly at the brutal, entirely avoidable execution that took place in the pre-dawn darkness. Mexican General Santa Anna was furious over the Texian revolt against his centralized government. Driven by ego and a desire to punish the rebellion personally, he marched 1,800 troops hundreds of miles north through freezing, punishing winter conditions. By early March, his officers advised patience. Heavy 12-pound siege cannons were arriving from the south in exactly 1 day. Those guns could have safely reduced the Alamo's walls to rubble without risking a single infantryman in a frontal assault. He refused to wait. He wanted a bloody, decisive spectacle to silence the rebellion. He ordered his buglers to play the deguello, an ancient Spanish melody with a terrifying meaning. No mercy, no quarter, and no prisoners. At 5:30 in the morning, the assault columns moved forward in the pitch black. The initial Mexican casualties were catastrophic. Texian gunners had loaded their artillery with grapeshot and chopped horseshoes, ripping through the dense masses of advancing troops at close range. This is a schematic showing the brutal mathematical reality that doomed the defenders. Each cannon took precious seconds to swab, reload, and fire. The Texians simply did not have enough guns on the walls to stop a human wave large enough to absorb those massive casualties and keep pressing forward. As the columns converged on the north wall, they created an overwhelming concentration of force, but they also slipped into a tactical dead zone. The Texian cannons were mounted on raised platforms. The gunners couldn't depress their barrels low enough to hit the soldiers directly beneath them at the base of the wall. Mexican soldiers scaled the walls, seized the heavy guns, and turned the barrels toward the plaza. The fortress walls were no longer defenses. They were the boundaries of a killing ground. William B. He was shot in the head before most of his men had even finished loading their second volley. With the perimeter breached and their commander dead, there was no organized retreat. The surviving defenders ran for the nearest doorways, barricading themselves inside the long barracks. Inside, the battle fractured into dozens of terrifying, isolated sieges. The corridors were so narrow that muskets were useless. In near-total darkness and suffocating powder smoke, men fought hand-to-hand with bayonets, knives, and fists on slippery limestone floors. James Bowie, the legendary knife fighter, never stood a chance. Wrecked by typhoid or pneumonia, he was largely confined to his cot. He died in a sickbed, surrounded by enemies he was too weak to fight off. Davy Crockett died that morning as well, though the exact circumstances are fiercely debated. Some accounts say he fell swinging a broken rifle, while others claim he was captured and executed by Santa Anna. The wild variations in his final moments tell us a lot more about the people shaping the myth than they do about the actual event. By 7 a.m., the gunfire stopped. An eerie silence fell over the smoking compound. The entire annihilation had taken exactly 90 minutes. Santa Anna ordered the bodies of the Texian defenders stacked on wooden pyres and burned. He wanted no graves, no markers, and no memorials. He tried to erase them from the earth, but his brutal methods permanently burned their sacrifice into history. Santa Anna then made his greatest miscalculation. He spared a handful of non-combatants, including a woman named Susanna Dickinson, and sent them east with a warning that resistance was futile. He expected her to carry fear. Instead, she carried fury. When the news reached Sam Houston, he made the agonizing decision to order a full retreat, prioritizing the survival of his small army over holding ground. This triggered a panicked civilian exodus across muddy roads known as the Runaway Scrape. As they fled, the story of the Alamo began to ferment among the terrified settlers. 6 weeks later, Houston's retreating army finally turned. At the Battle of San Jacinto, Texian soldiers charged across an open field in broad daylight, screaming, "Remember the Alamo." They routed the unprepared Mexican army in just 18 minutes. This map shows the official territorial claims of the newly formed Republic of Texas following the victory. The debt of those 90 minutes had been collected in full. Santa Anna was captured the next day, hiding in a marsh, and forced to concede to these vast new borders. Tactically, the Alamo was a massive military disaster, but narratively, it provided something much more valuable. It offered a story of ultimate sacrifice, potent enough to transform a fractured, disorganized rebellion into a unified cause. Preserving that simple narrative required leaving much of the reality behind. It meant marginalizing the Tejanos, who fought for the Constitution of 1824, the women like Susanna Dickinson, who bore witness, and Joe, the enslaved man whose testimony provided the first detailed account of the morning slaughter. When we examine the presence of these soldiers and survivors, alongside the military blunders, the Alamo becomes something more human and far more complicated than a simple heroic stand. It suggests that a nation's legacy is built not on the facts of a battle, but on the power of the story we choose to tell afterward.